Thank you very much for making time for us. Since your country extended this invitation on behalf of Kim Jong-un to President Trump, have you heard anything from North Korea in response?
Well, nothing publicly, but there is a channel of communication now established. So I'm sure there are back and forth messages. But I think the North Korean leader would also need some time, given the readiness with which President Trump has accepted the invitation to talks. I think we were all quite surprised by the readiness of that decision. I think it was an extremely courageous decision on the part of President Trump. We believe the North Korean leader is now taking stock and seeing what this means and preparing for his positioning on this. So yes, we give them the benefit of the doubt and the time that he would need to come out with some public messaging.
So you were surprised President Trump accepted so quickly. Do you think Kim Jong-un was surprised?
I think we all were, actually, but that is an indication of President Trump's determination that has been with him since day one in office to really come to grips with this issue once and for all.
Why do you think North Korea has been silent? Is Kim Jong-un bluffing with this offer?
As I said, I think he is taking stock. He has indicated his intention on the denuclearization issue, but also to discuss denuclearization and North Korea-U.S. ties with the president. And that was the clear message that our special envoys got from him and then conveyed to President Trump. So having made that offer and now having President Trump's yes to that, I think the North Korean leader will be taking stock and how to move forward in moving forward towards this what would be a historic meeting between the United States and North Korea at the summit level.
Well, in the meantime, your President Moon has
Yes.
plans already to
Yes.
meet with Kim Jong-un next month. What does South Korea hope to achieve from that conversation?
This is, of course, also a very historic engagement. And the North Korean leader is coming just south of the DMZ for the third inter-Korean summit. The two previous ones were held in Pyongyang, the North Korean capital. So the indication that he is willing to come south for this is very significant in itself. We have put together a preparatory committee headed by the Chief of Staff to the President. I am included in the preparatory committee as key ministers are, and are beginning to put the agenda, the logistics, and the communications aspect of this together. We want the South North Korean summit to be successful, but also to be a stepping stone towards the U.S. North Korean summit meeting, which we expect to produce a significant step forward on the denuclearization issue.
In the talks between North and South Korea, will the nuclear program even be a topic, or are you saving that for President Trump?
No, we're not saving that for, I think, President Trump. I think this is a concern not just for the United States, but for South Korea as well. I can't, prejudge what the agenda that we will be discussing with the North Koreans will be, but I think we will want to discuss key security issues, including the denuclearization issue.
So this isn't just about a starting point for diplomacy. You want to dig right into some of these military concerns as well.
Yes, well, the denuclearization is a key part of what we want to ultimately achieve on the Korean Peninsula, which is lasting permanent peace. And a denuclearized North Korea is a fundamental part of that vision for a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula.
What conditions do the North Koreans have to meet before this conversation happens?
Well, in effect, they already have. The conditions that we have said all along was that they need to stop the provocations, and the North Korean leader has said while the dialogues take place, there will no longer be further provocations. We have asked the North to indicate in clear terms the commitment to denuclearization, and he has, in fact, conveyed that commitment.
He's given his word.
He's given his word, but the significance of his word is quite weighty in the sense that this is the first time that the words came directly from the North Korean Supreme Leader himself, and that has never been done before.
Because there are, critics who say, in the meantime, no provocations, but they can continue enriching for their nuclear program, they can run computer models, they can continue to develop. And the risk of diplomacy is that it's just buying time for them to become even more of a threat.
Well, what would be achieved by letting go of this opportunity to engage? The programs will continue. We will not be slowing down any of that by not engaging. So I think the idea of engaging this opportunity to bring them towards a denuclearization track is something that we shared all together, the U.S., my country, and Japan, and China, and all the countries in the region.
Do you see this meeting between President Moon and Kim Jong-un as a model for what we can expect for when President Trump sits down with him?
All leaders have their styles. I think obviously there has to be some differentiation between the agenda on the South-North track. There are issues specific to the South-North track, such as the separated family reunion issues. So things to be dealt with at the South-North level, things to be dealt with at the U.S. North Korea level, but also a common element that should run through all of them, which is the nuclear issue.
Do you know any of the details yet of where this American summit might take place, or when?
Well, I think it's too early to tell. I think this was only just last week when the president received the briefing from our special envoys and readily accepted this invitation to talk. We will be closely discussing with our American colleagues every step of the way as we prepare for the South-North Korean summit meeting, but also beyond that, the U.S.-North Korea summit.
The White House says they do indeed plan for the summit to be by May. Are you surprised? I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, as you just said.
Yes, it's relative. I think when there's strong determination, especially at the summit, at the top leaders level, I think it's then our task to make sure that we are fully prepared and to produce a successful outcome.
Why was North Korea's foreign minister in Sweden this week, a country that acts as America's protecting power?
Well, I think there are bilateral issues between Sweden and the DPRK. Sweden is a neutral country that has relations with both South and North Korea. It has, as you say, been a protectorate power for many countries, not just the United States. So there would be issues. And I would be curious as you to know the discussions. And my good colleague, the Swedish foreign minister, will also be in Brussels as myself for the EU foreign ministers meeting. A good opportunity for me to catch up with her on this and other issues.
So Sweden could be a potential location for this summit?
Well, I don't know. The location will have to be decided between the U.S. and the DPRK. Obviously, as I say, we consult on all aspects of this, so we will certainly have our views, recommendations, but in the end it will be the United States and North Korea to decide.
The idea of a North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, meeting with an American president caught a lot of people by surprise. What is the significance of that to South Korea?
Well, it clearly demonstrates the President Trump's will, determination to resolve this issue once and for all. And I think that's hugely appreciated by the South Korean public. The previous years before the administration has been one of non-action, called strategic patience, but in the end it meant basically doing nothing while North Korea continued on the development of its nuclear and missiles capability. What has changed is the maximum pressure campaign, which is a series of Security Council sanctions, but also U.S. unilateral sanctions. We also have a list of unilateral sanctions as many other countries. So what is different now is a very heavy restriction on North Korea's economic activities in terms of trade, investments with the outside world. And so it is in a situation where 90% of its export revenues have been cut by the Security Council sanctions. If all members of the United Nations implemented the sanctions, it would mean 90% drop in their import revenues. They are no longer able to sell their large import items overseas. What goes into the country has also been greatly reduced by the sanctions. So North Korea is in a situation of very limited ability to engage economically with the outside world, which means it has very limited ways of improving the livelihood of the people, its economy, which is something that the new leader, the leader promised in his New Year address that he would invest a great deal in this year. And we know that what the leader says for his New Year address very much sets the tone for the rest of the year. So it's a clear indication of his desire to improve the North Korean economy, and that means the need to relieve itself some of these sanctions, and that can only happen when and if it takes significant steps towards denuclearization.
You're describing a weak North Korea financially.
Economically, definitely.
But they've never been this militarily strong when it comes to the development of their nuclear program. They've never come this close to being able to hit the U.S. mainland with a weapon before. Mm-hmm. So they're actually walking into these talks in a strong position in some ways.
But I think that's probably what goes into the North Korean calculation of coming out to dialogue at this point. But again, its strength on the side of its nuclear missiles program, but on the side of the economy, very, very weak and increasingly so. So this is the art of diplomacy and negotiation is what this boils down to, and getting them to move towards the denuclearization track, using the tools that we have to push them in that direction.
So what is South Korea and what is the U.S., its partner, willing to offer North Korea at this negotiation?
At this point, we haven't offered it anything. We had made it clear that we will engage, but there will be no reward for dialogue. And what we had insisted was that a clear declaration of an intent to denuclearize and the stopping of the further provocation. And that has clearly been said by the leader himself and conveyed by our envoys. So we will see. We will understand better their intentions once we start the preparatory talks for the summit, both South-North Korean summit and the U.S.-North Korean summit.
Your president campaigned on this promise of lowering tensions, right, and improving relations. And so it's led to some skepticism that perhaps South Korea might be overeager here. And in many ways, you've been the envoy for the United States in all of this. How do you reassure people that this isn't a matter of South Korea being too overeager?
I assure you, we are not overly eager. We do this with an understanding of the full history of discussions with North Korea. We have made it very clear that we are very much part of the sanctions regime, until we see a significant step being taken by North Korea on the denuclearization. So I think we are being practical, we are being consistent and persistent. We are not being overly eager.
Does South Korea trust Kim Jong-un?
As I say, it's not a matter of trusting. It's a matter of discussing and pressing for action. And once you see those actions, then you move forward further.
Before he was fired, Rex Tillerson, the outgoing Secretary of State, had promised that China would have a role at the negotiating table. Is that still the plan?
Well, we'll see. As I think it's critical to see the U.S. North Korea discussion moving forward. That's the critical piece of the diplomatic track towards a peaceful resolution. China is definitely a key player in this. China is a key part of the sanctions that have, in fact, changed North Korea calculations to come to dialogue. Yes, and we keep China closely consulted at bilateral levels. And at some point, yes, we will want very much China being part of the diplomatic endeavors.
Japan was also very surprised that President Trump accepted this invitation so quickly. Should this be a case where all of the allies are going into the room together instead of just the United States and North Korea?
Obviously, we need the buy-in of all countries that have a major stake in the North Korean nuclear issue and peace on the Korean Peninsula. But again, the critical piece is the U.S.-North Korea track, because what North Korea seeks, i.e. the easing of sanctions, guarantee for its security, is something that it wants from the United States. And so that link is the critical piece, but we can certainly extend that to a trilateral four-party or the existing six-party format.
So you had planned to come this week, and then you learned Rex Tillerson had been fired. That's who you're supposed to meet with. You still came here to Washington. You met with Ivanka Trump. You met with top officials at the State Department. Have you ever met Mike Pompeo before?
No, but my good colleague in our intelligence agency is I think closely in consultation with Mr. Pompeo. So I've heard good things about him. I expect to work closely with him as I have with Mr. Tillerson, whom I have been able to develop a very fruitful working relationship.
Do you think his firing hurts the diplomacy?
Yeah, obviously, changes of people need some time for the transition, but I think in the longer term, I think having Mr. Pompeo there with the full trust of the President and cabinet members serve with the trust of the President, and Mr. Pompeo certainly brings that direct connection to the President. So, in fact, I think it won't. In fact, it might even speed things up.
Both of our presidents are deeply involved with this issue, and the intelligence agencies seem to be in a lead role here. Do you feel the diplomats are being sidelined?
Well, I don't think we're being sidelined. I think when you're trying to create something as momentous as this and requiring the political will of the leaders at the topest level, you need to tread carefully, and certainly I think the diplomatic side of it, the intelligence side of it, all have to work together. So it's not a matter of somebody being sidelined. It's bringing all the assets that we have and to find the right combination. So no, I'm not worried about that. I think we all have a role to play in this.
Because there's been concern at the State Department. There's no U.S. ambassador to South Korea. There's no Senate-confirmed head of Asia policy. The envoy handling North Korea issues just quit. There is no envoy assigned to these particular talks. Isn't this hurting some of the diplomacy? Or are you saying that really it's the intelligence agencies that need to get this done?
No, we would like to see these critical posts in our counterpart, your ambassador in Seoul, the successor to Joseph Yoon. But this is your personnel decision making, and we would like to see that move ahead very quickly and these posts filled quickly. But we work with what we have. We're not going to be criticizing but I think in the end it's the machinery. It's not just the people involved. These are huge machines that work, if I may to put it that way. And yes, we very much want these posts filled as quickly as possible. But in the meanwhile, we work with. I had an excellent discussion with Mr. Sullivan yesterday, and I think the professionals know how to fill the gap while they last.
Who's in charge of the American preparations for the summit?
Well, I think certainly it's with the president being the principal here. We would expect the president's office, the National Security Council, perhaps. But this is up for the U.S. side to decide, and we will very much be in a consultative mode so that the South-North preparations go very much hand in hand with the U.S. DPRK summit preparations.
When President Trump says things like he did reportedly at this political event earlier this week when he suggested U.S. troops could be removed because of a trade dispute, how are those comments received in South Korea?
Well, anytime troops are mentioned, it raises eyebrows, but I think we need to read those comments in the larger scheme of things, which is the president himself has many times indicated strong commitment to the alliance, to the American troop presence in our country. This has also been repeated in recent policy papers that have come out of the administration. So yes, it has caught attention, but we are absolutely confident of the American commitment to the alliance and the troop presence in our country.
So you don't take comments like that seriously?
Well, we take any comment coming from the president very seriously, but in the larger scheme of things, and the larger scheme of things is this alliance that have been the bedrock of peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, but also the Northeast Asia for decades.
You've been busy while you're here in Washington. You were also up on Capitol Hill talking about some of these trade concerns. The president has been very tough on South Korea when it comes to trade. Next week, those tariffs on steel and aluminum go into effect. What's going to happen to South Korea? Well,
we've been arguing very much, as ally, and particularly and a visible alliance at this point when we are trying to make the most of this opportunity that is created to come to terms with the North Korean nuclear issue, that we need an exemption on this. And I've had a good discussion with Mr. Ross over the phone yesterday. Our trade minister is here. We are, my president has also mentioned this to President Trump. So we've put all of our arguments and considerations on the table, and we're hoping for a good result.
No assurances that you will be exempt yet?
Well, I think we'll know when the decision is made and announced, but I think we're putting the best arguments in place.
This comes in the middle of what was already a tough renegotiation of that U.S. free trade deal with South Korea. So are you concerned that some of this beating up on trade is going to hurt the alliance?
There has always been trade issues, and the steel issue is not entirely new. Successive administration, I understand, have had tariff issues as well. This is particularly big, but we take it for what it is and try to deal with it. I think it's, you deal with the issue as such and not exaggerate it or conflate it with other issues. But again, yes, coming at this particular time, it's not helpful.
Are you concerned that the president will scrap that free trade deal known as KORUS?
I think, I was just on the phone with my trade minister who is here for the last minute negotiations with your trade representative. We're putting, we come also with our position. The U.S. has its position, and the the nature of these negotiations is that you try to find a way. You can't get everything that you want, neither side, and so you find a medium where you would be satisfied with the outcome. And I think we will get there.
And more broadly, that agreement still has to be signed to continue to keep U.S. troops in South Korea. Is there any appetite in South Korea to see U.S. troops removed? Is that in any way part of a negotiation with North Korea?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think you're talking about the special measures agreement, i.e. Our share of the cost of the U.S. troops stationing in South Korea. This is the 10th round of such negotiation, and it had just started in Honolulu last week. Basically changed the starting point of the two sides in this consultations. We will have the second round in Korea in April, but we believe that we are an exceptionally good ally when it comes to this issue of cost sharing. By all indicators, we are very high in our share. So we will put the best of our argument put forward, and this is something that needs to go through Parliament for approval. And this is a government that is particularly committed to accountability and transparency toward the people. So we will do this with the full transparency, reporting back to our Parliament occasionally and seeking parliamentary approval in the fall session. So it has just started. It's not going to be easy. None of these negotiations are easy. As close ally as we are, when it comes to negotiation, we all bargain very hard. But the fundamental issue of the troop presence in South Korea is a non-issue. It's something that is such an anchor of our security and foreign policy, and it is only a matter for the U.S. and the Republic of Korea to discuss. Nobody else.
Minister, thank you.
Thank you.